Yeah, so I want what I want to do today, like, which is kind of unconventional a little bit, is I really want to go through this list that you sent me about some of the crazy stuff that you've done, and but first, why? Like, we're going to talk about like funding your label and different marketing things, and I think our audience is going to love the opportunity to use you as a guinea pig and say, okay, you've done a podcast advertisement, was it worth it? These are just the big questions because a lot of us chicken out from spending money and doing stuff like that. Yeah. So to have someone like you who have wasted your money on our behalf was great. Before though, like what is it about your personality or your entrepreneurialism that you think to go outside the box and to take chances like that with starting the label and doing some of these weird promotional things that we're going to discuss in a minute?
Well, do you want to talk? See, you asked me about what was kind of the start of all of this.
Well, yeah, I mean, sure, you can start there. I'm just curious about your personality, or why you think, hey, let's do some crazy stuff. I mean, we've got a list here. What is it about you as an entrepreneur that makes you go that direction?
I think, so when I started Flower Sounds, I wasn't really on the Spotify bandwagon yet. It was 2018. I didn't use Spotify. I wasn't really big on it. So I was kind of late to the Spotify game, I think, in the grand scheme of things. So then I think it was just trying to find, I think it was seeing how saturated everything is right now, and trying to, and by listening to your podcast, first and foremost, I love music. It's my life.
Yeah.
But all I listen to is podcasts these days. So
a lot of people are like that. Yeah.
So
that's funny.
It's just like basically trying things out that might help, anything that would be a different direction than what everyone else is doing. So I think, like, for example, when I finally did get onto Spotify, which was only like a year and a half ago, maybe it was 40, 60,000 songs a day were getting uploaded. And I think it's like 100,000 songs as we record this episode. So, and I've seen in just that 1 year, it was much easier to get songs on Spotify and have it be heard. And then even trying out some of the things that are on this list that I sent you. And, spoiler alert, some of them didn't, I don't think really even worked out because of how saturated everything is at the moment, or at least it feels that way. But we can get into the weeds of it. Yeah.
Yeah. Let me ask you a side question, completely unrelated to running a record label. When you get stuck in traffic, do you like veer off and take the side roads, or do you just sit there and deal with it?
I had to, when I was younger, I got a lot of speeding tickets, so I had to take a driving course. And they did one of those forms we had to fill out, kind of what kind of driver you were. And weirdly, I was all of the above. I feel like it depends on kind of where I am at the moment.
Yeah.
So I don't know, it depends on the environment, I guess. If I'm gonna try to get off the exit and get back on and try to beat the traffic. It depends on the universe in a way.
I get that. The reason I ask is it's like a metaphor for what you're talking about here is like, even if it's not the right decision, I'll get out of traffic because I look at traffic and I think you're a bunch of sheep. You're just following the everybody else. And it's the same kind of thing for like pitching your song to Spotify or just tweeting out, we have a new album. Yeah. It's like you're one of a million people on Friday. Why not do something weirder, like knock on your neighbor's door and try to get them to buy a record? You know what I mean? So that's kind of like, that's the reason I asked that stupid question.
No, thank you. I found that I love your podcast a lot, and thank you for having me on. And
thank you.
And using a lot of the interviews, listening to a lot of the episodes was kind of the idea to like try different things. And like having, I forget, talking to some of the more major indie labels, like talking about multiple releases on the same day. So okay, what if I do 3 releases on the same day and see what happens? It kind of, I mean, there's such low stakes in a way. And I
know.
So that it is fun to try stuff. But now actually funny, well, we'll get to it when we can ask me more individual questions.
Well, okay, we'll start there about the multiple releases on one day. But I get what you're saying, because it ends up being kind of like buying a lottery ticket in that eventually you may win or something. But like, and I think it's like when you do these experimental marketing things, something might come out and it becomes your deal. I mean, speaking of the podcast, years ago we had a label on called Geographic North, and they had this idea to release their tapes on Thursday night at like 8 p.m. And then basically anybody who was already had previously purchased from their from Bandcamp would get the notification like the night before the general public would find out about the album. And so that ended up becoming kind of their thing, where like if you're on their mailing list, or if you're a previous customer, you'd get a notification on Bandcamp ahead of everyone else. And it really mattered because these guys were selling out pretty quickly. So it was completely experimental, and it ended up becoming, it worked so well for them, it became their thing. So like hopefully some of the things that we're going to talk about in a second, like some of them won't work, some of them do work, and it ends up becoming something special to you.
To the podcast listener, I'm nodding my head. Very much yes.
Okay.
And yeah, it's kind of the ethos. I don't think Picasso said it, but whoever said, talent is. No, wait, hold on. Let me take this over.
Yeah, I think I know where you're going.
Talent is borrowing, but great artists steal. Like all these great ideas,
right. Yeah,
from wherever they come from. Right. Like I am not at the point of the label you just mentioned. Like my audience is slowly building, but I could see a point where a release comes out, and that if I know it's going to sell out, there are a few artists I work with that would sell out overnight. Yeah, I could totally do like a pre-sale.
Sure.
That'd be for fans. That sounds awesome.
Yeah, it's cool. It is a cool idea. So let's get granular, because I think this is fun. We don't ever get to do this on the show, but like 3 releases in one day. Let's start there. That's ill-advised. I'm going to tell you my opinion before you tell me how it went, because I want to see, because like I'm going to be the devil's advocate. I'm going to be like conventional wisdom here.
Yeah.
So conventional wisdom is that give every release its own day in the sun, literally.
Yeah.
And so, but I also can see the upside. So tell me how it went, and what was the impetus?
So there was, if it's okay if I talk about each individual artist, it was 3 releases on the same day. It was an LA artist called The Lentils. And then the second release was a Flower Sounds compilation of international artists and local artists here in Western Massachusetts. And then the third release was one of my own bands called Icicle, which is all uppercase, Icicle, lowercase L, no E. You'll see it when you see it.
Sure. Yeah.
And so the idea was that the Lentils, they have a following. They have a very cult following. He's a brilliant singer-songwriter. Highly recommend checking him out. And he had a new album, Budget Alchemy. And then kind of the idea was to take the heat or the fans of the Lentils and try to see if I can get the compilation, which had a bunch of artists that I work with in my Flower Sounds label. And then also for my own personal,
Smart.
Was the debut album of my one of my bands, Icicle. Yeah. So it was kind of the idea. I had the release before. I worked with an artist named David Reese, who he's an author, TV writer. He's a humorist. He has a podcast called Election Profit Makers. And his album sold out in 2 hours. It was like the best release I had up until that time. And this was the first release I had with the Lentils. So I had all this heat with one artist. So the idea of like, okay, I have a compilation of multiple artists and then I have my own band. Can I piggyback off of the Lentils? Now, what would have been, or let me backtrack. So Flower Sounds whatever music is kind of, there's no limit to
no genre.
No genre, yeah. And it's really funny too, because just this week I had two separate people contact me. One from Italy who played like soul funk, and one from California who was like a singer-songwriter, like completely different genres, and they're both like sending me demos. So I'm doing something very weird here. So I had the release date in April for all three albums, and I think you're right. It was helpful because I did see like the listens. It did bring traffic it did bring traffic to my Bandcamp, which is where it ran off,
right?
Which is what I run the label off of. And I did see a lot of plays on all three, with the Lentils having most of the traffic.
So
it was very helpful. But what I think I would have just done the compilation and the Lentils. I think throwing my band Icicle in, because that's a more electronic band, and Lentils is more like bedroom Bob Dylan. I think if I focused it more, I think if I played it more to the Lentils fans, that would have been more a better move.
Because I guess now, like, this hindsight's so easy because I can see arguments for both sides. But like, I guess you could say like there is a possibility of overwhelming them to the fans to the point of paralyzing them, saying these are all cool, I'm getting none of them.
I think it was too much. I think focusing with the compilation, because the compilation also has the Lentils on it, and some. It does cover everything from electronic to minimal piano to noise. The compilation, which is called FLO 10, it's the 10th release of the album. Sorry, I have to promote my label.
That's fine. That's okay. You can. Go ahead. This is your time.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And so that would have been the smarter move in hindsight. It was just focus on the two. And so now I'm on to this year. I've done a release by a new artist, Bobby. And then I had another
I love that.
Release.
I love that. The acoustic guitar on that record. So beautiful.
It's so beautiful. They're a really young artist.
So beautiful.
And we'll talk about Bobby maybe more later.
Sure.
And I'm trying to do releases every 1 to 2 months. And I'm finding that working better. And I think I do want to do the multiple releases on the same day, especially with a compilation. But this time, focusing more on maybe a similar genre, or I think I took the idea from maybe like Merge Records, or I forget which episode it was. It was an episode of your podcast with a major indie label having like two artists. I think
maybe it was Warp recently. It could have been Warp.
Could have been Warp. And
I haven't had Merge on, so it probably wasn't them.
Who has? Yeah, it was with.
I think it's Warp. It sounds familiar. If it was recent, but you know what? There's actually a label called Hotham from Vancouver, and we haven't had them on the show, but they did it recently on Twitter. They just dropped 3 tapes in one day. And I think it was just kind of like, I think one of the benefits too, tell me if this is right, is that it's a ton of effort for one day, but then it's all out, as opposed to, it's almost like consolidating your work.
Yeah. And it's really fun and exciting. And it is, that was the one bummer of it, is that it was juggling these 3 releases, having them on the same day. But this is all super fun, and I find so much joy doing this and getting music out.
That's awesome.
And and getting to the point now where sorry, you'll edit out all the silence, right?
I do. I don't actually. But go on. That's okay. People are just on the treadmill. They got time.
I have my own podcast, and I always edit out all the ums and all the.
Oh yeah.
It's okay. I'm glad they get to hear my brain in action.
I was just thinking about this release date thing, and we'll move on. But
sure.
What I think is, I've talked about on this show a lot, is the importance of post-release day. And so really it shouldn't matter. If you release all 3 on one day, it shouldn't matter if it goes well or not, because you're supposed to keep working on those records afterwards.
Exactly. And what's really helpful is getting reviews out of the records. And yeah, absolutely. I find that's been really helpful too, is exactly. Yeah. But that is a tough thing. Like, that is something I'm still working on post release. And, but
it's hard.
You do find it is interesting to find, like, whether it be on Reddit or if something comes up and you have the YouTube video and you can send it somewhere, or for example, again, about the lentils, I'm a big fan of Office Hours Live, and they had King Tuff, who is he's on Sub Pop. He's a really great artist. He's from Brattleboro, and the Lentils, Luke Chesek, he's also from Brattleboro. So I know Luke and I know Kyle King Tuff. So I went on Office Hours Live.
On the live, yeah.
And I while King Tuff was on, I was like, hey man, like, how's it going? Hey, you know who should be on the show is the Lentils. And like, so, you know, there's definitely times if you are working closely with your artists where you know in your head when you can like take a moment to like promote the artist where it might work out. And that's a podcast. They have, you know, hundreds and thousands of streams. And that was a really good opportunity to get. And that was a perfect example of people who like King Tuff will like the Lentils as well. So it worked out really well.
Right. That's awesome. So take me back to the beginning, starting this label. Tell me the story about like selling your record collection. What happened there?
Totally. So yeah, I thought we would start here first, but this is fun.
We go all over the place. Unpredictable.
I love it. This came out of my obsession with Discogs, and I always bought records. So I moved to New York City in like the mid 2000s, and I just always was surrounded by friends who bought records and worked at record stores. And while living in New York, I just would go digging like every weekend, all the time on my time off, and I just accrued like a pretty sizable record collection. And then I realized I have too much. And I, like, before I moved out of the city, maybe like around 2011, I sold a significant amount. And I made so much money, I like bought a ticket to New Zealand and went to New Zealand for a while. And that was like the first time I like flipped my collection a little bit. And then, but I always kept buying. And then
sorry, let me just interject here. This is because you bought in the early 2000s before like some of these records, people realizing how rare these records were, right? So they appreciated. Am I right?
It's kind of all about being at the right place at the right time. Like the vinyl, I was a little bit ahead of the vinyl resurgence. But then again, like with my label, I don't think I was like early to the I mainly sell cassettes and put out stuff digitally. No, sure. And like I was kind of like about being right place, right time. Like, I'm not some magician. I'm not always doing that. Yeah. But so then, like, so
you bought a ticket to New Zealand.
That was just the first time sorry, my cat's here.
That's all right.
So that was like the first time I like flipped my collection and like saw that kind of like there's like hobby investing. Like, oh, like, like maybe I spent all my money on records, but they're worth something and I can sell them later for, it's kind of like, you know, playing the market in a way. It's funny too, like I bought Kanye records as we record this, like those, I don't think those are going to sell. Like,
right.
So it's interesting, like how having a record collection is almost like hobby investing. Like there is a marketplace for it. So I discovered Discogs about 2017 and it was like, it was so much fun. I categorized my whole label. I categorized my whole collection. And when you're like a record nerd or a music nerd, you know where you were when you bought each record.
Yes, so I 100% agree.
it took time to like categorize it all. It took like a while. And then I had it all there and it was like, well, I don't really want this record. It's worth $50. What if I sell it? This 7-inch I don't care about. It's worth $60. So then I started flipping all these records that I wasn't so much into anymore. And I started putting all this money into PayPal. So there I was at the post office, and I see another guy who's holding a, cardboard mailer. He's mailing a record. And I just like went up to him and was like, "Hey man, like you selling stuff too?" He's like, "Well, I'm actually I work for this guy, this musician." I was like, "Oh yeah?" He's like, "Yeah, this guy, Dave Bigsby." And I was like, "Well, where you're mailing this record to?" He's like, "Oh, Australia." He's got a big So I live in a small town in Western Mass called Greenfield. So I'm talking to this guy. He's mailing this record from an artist I never heard of to Australia, and he's got a big following. So we started chatting more. Is this guy Derek? Derek Hart is his name, and he's kind of like the unofficial official manager of this guy Dave Bigsby. So then I go into Discogs. Who is Dave Bigsby? He has $1,000 record on Discogs, and that's like that's like a big deal, So Dave Bigsby is this guy. Really interesting story. You could do a whole podcast episode on him. In the late 60s, he lived in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and he got way into acid. Like so much so he like, as the legends say, he lost his mind. So then he joined a cult in Grand Rapids. I forget the name of the cult. There's a book all about this. And he got sober. And it was a Christian cult. So he made this, it's called Ode to Quetzalcoatl. And I recommend everyone checking it out. It's now like a cult record. I don't own a copy of this record. It's like a collector's item.
Sure.
So he owned it. So he joined this cult, got sober, and wrote all these songs about how he destroyed his mind and body. And it's really dark and moody. And recently he got a couple years ago, A$AP Rocky sampled him. So he got on Spotify now, he has hundreds of thousands of monthly listeners, and he's in a top tier of he's technically the biggest artist I work with. So then, this is 2018, and I look at his Discogs, and there's no cassette of Ode to Quetzalcoatl, and his represses are running for $40. And at the time, I just discovered Cassettes.
Right.
And the two labels that really struck me was Spring Break Tapes and Patient Sounds. I don't think either of them exist today. And what was cool about Spring Break Tapes, my buddy was on it, and I saw this cassette, and I don't know how old you are, Scott, but I'm 40. And when I was younger in the 80s, cassettes were the ugliest things, like aesthetically, like a cassette had all this writing on it. You open the J card, it's 10 pages long. Nothing about a cassette is aesthetically pleasing.
Yeah.
And then here was this thing that we're this Spring Break tape of my buddy Alex. Oh my God, I'm blanking on my friend's name. But my buddy Alex, and he goes by Power Mystery. And the cassette was gorgeous. It had a photo that he took in Colombia. I never saw a cassette like that. It was my first introduction to the cassette resurgence.
Yeah.
And then I was like, oh my God, who else is doing this? And then I found Patient Sounds. I think they're out of Chicago. And they had you could probably find their back catalog. Again, gorgeous J cards. Everything was in the same kind of universe, had the same kind of aesthetic. Yeah. And it just clicked. It's what if I put out this guy's Ode to Quetzalcoatl on cassette? And so I asked Derek, and I contacted Dave Bigsby. Has a long story. After the cult disbanded, he became a sailor. He was stranded on a desert island. This guy's worth Googling.
Yeah, for sure.
And then a music journalist found him just in Arizona. He lives there now. He's playing music again. And he's probably in his 70s now. So I, through a series of talking to Dave Bigsby over the phone, we worked together and we released his Ode to Quetzalcoatl on cassette for the first time, and that was the first Flower Sounds release. Which I gotta tell you, as a record nerd and music nerd, to have that album as my first release felt so good, because it's here is the thing that here is an album that is to record collectors like means a lot. And like,
right.
And so like now I'm already like, justified as a music label in a way. Cause I put this out.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
It's funny. I'm sorry if I'm rambling, but
no, it's good.
I think this is true for people. I really wanted to be helpful to people who are starting out labels. That's why I enjoy this podcast so much. And like, when I hear imposter syndrome a lot, I was like, what is that? Like, I don't really get that. And I realized early on when I was selling cassettes, feeling that imposter syndrome with like people would buy a cassette early on. And I'd be like, oh my God, like this isn't real. I should send them 2 cassettes. Like,
yeah, I've done that too.
I just felt so like I'm a fake, I'm a fraud. And that did wear off after a while, but definitely like it was nice to have a release like that. And like we were talking, I think you wanted to ask me questions about like how to how to stand out kind of. And I think that there is ways to find music that hasn't been released in certain formats where you can.
That's a great idea.
I do have ideas that I can't share with you that I am scheming, but there's definitely avenues that you can find to release music that hasn't been released. And we can talk more about that as well. And like this was a perfect example of putting a cassette out of an album that was like a collector's item that hadn't been on a cassette yet.
Well, I think this emphasizes what I talked about last week on the podcast at the time of recording this when we were talking about unfair advantage. And it's like you are a Discogs fanatic, and you're selling these records, and then you meet this guy at the post office, and your unfair advantage is kind of having this insight into the world of collectors. And so you kind of like reissuing this rare item on cassette was like scratching your own itch. And
100%.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
That's the best way to start.
I couldn't have asked for a better way to start. And it was really, I had to find someone. A shout out to Kat Woods, who was my friend's sister, who had to help me out with Photoshop. Now I've had to buy Photoshop and teach myself how to use it to keep up with stuff. But like, how does the importance of the aesthetic of the cassette and like to work with the artist to make sure that it's correct. Because
how did that release do?
I mean, really, so here's the really funny thing. So I was obsessed with Discogs and like record collections. That's where this all started for me. It wasn't so much about, I would look at Discogs and I would think, oh man, like I want to create something on there. If I have a label on there, I want to have 1 million releases like Warp Records or Matador. And sorry, what was the question? I got too excited.
That's okay. How did the Bigsby record do, the tape, when you released it?
It did great. And so the silly thing I did was being a record nerd, I just sent copies to all the record stores that I loved for free. I sent them to Academy in Brooklyn, to Waterloo in Austin, Texas. Like
this tape?
I sent them free copies of this tape, and Dave Bixby had a second one called Harbinger, Second Coming, and I sent them my own because I thought it was more important to me that record collectors and music collectors who are snobby have my stuff in their collection. And that is not how I feel anymore.
Okay, so why do you regret that?
I regret that because that was kind of an elitist way to look at music collecting. Like, I was so caught up in like the collectability and the scarcity created by having. So my label only does 100 copies.
Right. So you gave away just inventory that you could have sold to normal fans.
And like, So a cassette. I mean, prices are like doubled since 2018 when I started 5 years ago. So that cassette that I was selling for $5, then $10, then $15. Like I gave away free stuff that could have financed more releases, because this isn't about making money. This is about creating. Keep going.
Yeah.
And the hope one day is to put out vinyl, but I think that's going to be really far off.
So did you so you sent these tapes to these stores. How many of them like said, "Gee, thanks. We're going to sell these," and how many of them just ignored you?
That's the thing. And again, I'm kicking myself because I got no feedback back. I don't live. I sent them to cities. Some of them I live far away. Mm-hmm. It was more, and I just gave them a note like, "I love your store. Here's some cassettes."
Oh,
and like, I didn't even know, like, I was hoping that even the people who were working there would just take them. Like, I just kind of sent them to them.
Yeah, no, I know what you mean. Yeah.
And I think I had like an elitist view of owning collections, and I don't feel that way anymore. I much rather like give a tape to someone for free than someone who already has everything in their collection having another thing. Like I my feeling on it has changed. And I do regret that it was a silly thing that I did. One of my many silly things that I'll just try. And like, but definitely my ethos has changed about how I view music collecting. And now I'm more about working with artists and trying to help out artists than to like create flower sounds for my own ego or something. Like,
I think it's something that all of us would do, and it's all of us have done in our own way. So I don't think it's silly in any way. And I imagine, because I mean, I would still do something like it. I've still like sent a record to somebody just because I hope that they'll fall in love with it or they'll tweet about it or something. You know what?
No, you're totally right. And I agree with that too. I think that's the thing too. That's the thing. I was having fun earlier, and now I do see it as a way to help artists. So my focus has changed now. I think I agree with you. If you have someone that you have in mind, if you do have a connection with someone in the industry and you want to send them something, absolutely do that. That's very smart. But I think, doing what I did, just sending it to record stores that I like, I mean, maybe something happened out of it, but I have no way of I had no one responded to me, but I wasn't looking for a response either. It was just like a silly thing.
Yeah. Okay. Talk to me about promoting through a weed delivery service in New York City. What does that look like? Okay. Where did that idea come from, and how did it turn out?
So I have to correct it. I was kind of nervous talking about this, but I think we can. They didn't deliver weed. They delivered something else that was psychedelic and not very legal in New York City.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So my someone that I know works at a legal delivery spot in the city, and this was very helpful. We got on their so when you ordered from them, they sent you a text, and we got on their text for Spotify. They sent a Spotify link, and that was incredibly helpful. So this is with my band Icicle, and
so they have like a mass text that they for all their clients.
When you order from this service,
delivery service, they can be delivering anything, right? Pizza or whatever. Yeah. Okay, go on.
Sometimes mushrooms is a topping on pizza.
Sure, of course.
And this is perfect because Icicle was electronic music, and we're kind of in the Aphex Twin Warp Records again. Actually, funny enough, I have a story about Warp Records I'll get to later. But this was like a perfect harmonious thing, and we got on there. When you order from them, you get a text with a bunch of information, and they said, "Oh, you want some chill music to listen to?" And we got on there, and that was extremely helpful.
How do you know it was like? Why was it extremely helpful?
Because it was the debut album of our album, and it was honestly the biggest promotion we had. Because all of a sudden we had hundreds of listeners. Where I don't think on my own promoting, and Flower Sounds isn't at the point yet where if I drop a release, I'll get that kind of heat.
I understand. Yeah.
I mean, it's slowly. The nice thing that's been really fun is that I'm slowly by continuing to do this label, I am seeing things trickle up. That's amazing. Yeah, that was a very fun and different thing. And then also so here was one thing that we also did that was with the delivery service was we printed out download codes through Bandcamp. Okay. You get the free.
Yep.
So I personally printed out and cut these and mailed them, and they got delivered with the product. But that one you could track, and it wasn't as.
There's so many steps for them.
Yeah,
to go to their computer.
So that was probably like $50 to do, to like print out these download codes, and there wasn't like a ton of downloads that came out of that. But it was like a physical. It was almost like a flyer in a way, but definitely by having the click of the link to the Spotify, that was really helpful.
Well, because if they have Spotify, it's on their phone. So if they get a text, it goes right. It starts playing immediately. It's completely frictionless.
So convenient. Yeah, Wade's your thing.
Yeah,
I think download code was like kind of more. I think it's like handing out a flyer outside of a store. It's just people will just toss it.
Oh my gosh!
Yeah, I wouldn't. I don't think I would do that again. Now sending download code. Now here's the thing where download codes work great is when I do have a sale, and I will definitely put a free download code in the album and send it out.
Oh sure. And even when people tweet them, I think when you see a tweet, 50% of the time you're at your computer or perhaps on your phone, but you can at least copy it. Like you might be able to do it through the app, but like at least you're at your computer. Whereas in this delivery service, they get a piece of paper, they're at the front door, they're going to go right to their computer, or you know what I mean?
Absolutely, yeah.
It's very slim. But that Spotify text idea, that's awesome. That's really cool. And so and how did you know that they listened? Like you just saw numbers go up?
I saw numbers go up, yeah. And that was the only promotion we had for the album, period. So, I don't know that many people.
Have you thought about doing that again, maybe with that service or with other like people who have access to text? Like, because one of the smart things about that was not just like the medium that you used, which was text, but the smart thing was that your music fit that customer base based on what you know about people who like pizza, specifically mushrooms.
Now, luckily I had a bandmate. I didn't really orchestrate this. I orchestrated the download codes, but the bandmate in Icicle did, and it was a perfect, it was so perfect. I don't know how to. That's a hard thing. That's kind of right place, right time. That's kind of just working your connections, which, is another idea that, if living in New York City, which is, I recommend to everyone, you learn things that like, you have to just take every opportunity you can get when you're trying to work on something. And that if you're given an opportunity in life or a privilege, sometimes you just got to use that opportunity and privilege and just go for it.
Yeah.
Everyone's trying. So you take what you have and you go, any connection you have, like some of the ideas that I had that I won't be sharing today, you have to think of when to strike. But for example, David Reese, the artist I work with, his cassette sold in 2 hours. When he was on Twitter, he had a lot of like thousands of Twitter followers. So I had a friend who knew him, and David Reese made a mashup album like a long time ago. Speaking, so funny, these same things keep coming up. He made an Aphex Twin Taylor Swift mashup album.
Oh, okay.
And I was trying to think of artists I could work with that I could bring something new to Flower Sounds. And I thought, this mashup album is really cool. I don't care if it's copyright material. Why don't I contact this artist? So I went through my friends, Rob and Paloma, who put me in contact with him. And this is during the pandemic. And wouldn't you know it, David Reese is making a noise album. So then we started talking, we worked together, and we put out his album. And like, I had a connection to this person who's quasi-famous. And I used that connection to make something happen. And I'm so happy too, because I'm a huge fan of it. I'm a huge fan of all of his work. And here was someone that I knew something. I had a feeling that there was something there. And I had a connection to this person and I just went for it and it worked out.
So let me ask you about the idea of like this kind of this compound interest into your label, because now, assuming you sell records on Bandcamp, now those 100 people who bought that tape that sold out, they're getting notifications about your other releases. Is that becoming beneficial?
Yes. So I'm challenged. So with Flower Sounds, I'm kind of like a real, you might not, your listeners can't see me and I don't look like it, but I'm a very hippie kind of, I live in the woods. I'm a pretty silly guy. And, I wanted to put as many things on my Discogs page as possible. I want to release as much stuff as possible, but I don't always have the money to release cassettes. So so an artist in Japan contacted me, and he sent me a demo of his stuff, and his stuff was really cool, but he like sent me a lot of stuff, and all of it was like together. And I thought, well, what if we put out a single? So then I thought of the idea, well, what if we do like a solstice series? He had a song about like the spring. And I was like, okay, well, let's put this song out on the equinox, on spring.
Yeah.
So then that made me think, well, what if I put out a single every equinox and every solstice? So now I have the Flower Sounds Solstice series. So I now have to force myself 4 times a year to find a song or a single, put it out meet an artist, talk to them, put it out for free, work with them with artwork and choosing a song. And that's just a way to continue to release stuff, to continue to give content to people on Bandcamp to the fall. You have to continually release stuff and like push yourself to like do it. And it's been great too, because I don't always have the next release. So sometimes I have to hustle to find that release.
Good for you.
And I'll reach out to friends, and like I have a friend, Victor Senor, who's an amazing jazz musician. He has nothing put out. And it's like, okay, let's put out a song, man. Just choose one. Let's do it.
Yeah.
So it's fun to challenge yourself to continue to have releases come out.
Yeah. No, that's great. And I what I see it as is like I'm experimenting with that too. And it's like there's something about just like stoking the fire. And, if you go dark, and I'm thinking like as an independent artist as well, not just a label, but if you go dark for 6 months or a year, if you take the traditional album cycle, then you have to kind of like, it takes a little bit more work to wake up your followers. And some people will unsubscribe from you if you're not active. Whereas having something new come out every month, or even more than that, I don't find that like any sort of diminishing return.
Exactly.
Where some people would go, oh, I'm going to overwhelm my audience, especially for independent artists. I don't see that happening. Yeah.
There's no. In this day and age with all the content, I think it's quantity over quality, honestly. And like,
I totally agree.
And it's funny, and like it's also like my name is John Sheena. I'm a solo artist. It took me 4 years to put out my first album. I worked on it so hard, and like that was so silly. I wish I just like made it and put it out, and then worked on the next thing.
I moved on. Yeah,
this is something I've learned with my age, and that I think not being precious. I think. Exactly, quantity over quality. There's a great quote too. It's like quality changes, but quantity doesn't. Quantity stays the same.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, like quality is subjective, but quantity isn't.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and like there's probably some listeners right now who aren't loving that concept, but especially the artist type. But I think like obviously quality is there, and quality, ideally it's quantity and quality.
Right. Yeah. Don't put out crap. Yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, if you had to pick one, I think if you were to pick quality over quantity, and that meant that you were only releasing something every 3 years, then no, that's not great.
Only certain people. I mean, if you're like the Avalanches and you put out an album every 15 years, or like you know, if you're a certain caliber, but if you're not there, you can't do that.
yeah, you can't think that you're there.
You know what's so nice too, and this is kind of another ethos. There's a great book, Please Kill Me: The Oral History of Punk Rock, and there's a big thing I took out of that with the Ramones. Now, I think this is for any artist too, or kind of the attitude. Like anytime someone would ask the Ramones, "Oh, how'd you make it? How'd you break it? How'd you get big?" They said, "Oh, play shows, play shows, play shows, play shows." So I think, and of course, the quality has to be there, but I think it's the idea of the quantity of forcing yourself to see what you can release. You don't always have to have a physical release. It could be digital. You can put out singles. In the case of that band, in the case of the Beatles as well, it was the quantity that created the quality. It was because of the quantity that the quality arrived later. And there's famously very bad Beatles songs.
Right. Yeah. So real quick before we go, tell me about the podcast thing, because just going back to this delivery service and the idea of like knowing that the people who are buying product X are also going to be fans of electronic music. That theory can parlay into a lot of other things. And so especially in the podcast world where there's like niche podcast themes, it's like, I bet these listeners of this topic will be fans of XYZ type of music. So tell me what happened there.
Well, so I think, David Reese has the artist I work with, he has a podcast, really funny. He's an amazing guy, called Election Profit Makers, where there's a website called Predicted where you can bet on election results. Okay. And it's a culture podcast. It's about politics. It's about a bunch of stuff, but really it's like the two hosts. It's really entertaining. So they, as a kind of like, while riffing, they're like, what if we took ads? Yeah. So I immediately, because I had David's email, I was like, hey, I'll put an ad out. And I put the ad out on, it's an election focused podcast. And we did an ad in January of 2022 for American listeners. Like this is the most dead time to have.
Right. Nothing going on. So yeah. Okay.
I think I will do it again, but maybe closer in a better date.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah.
And I think,
and did the host read like the copy?
Yeah. And I put, we put David's music behind it. The copy, the ad was great. It was really fun. It was the second ad they ever did on their podcast. Yeah. And the funny thing is that with David Reese's album in particular, like when he released it, he was talking about on his podcast, and he's also a big he loves guitar pedals. There's he talks about them a lot. So when his album was coming out, he was promoting it on his podcast and on his Twitter. So it was kind of like there wasn't any like heat. So this ad kind of like was a bit cold, I think. Yeah, but I would totally.
I see.
I think the interesting thing about podcasts is we're recording this episode, and this episode is going to come out at some point, but then it's going to be in your library forever. So it's if I was to buy another ad spot on another podcast, make sure that you try to line it up with maybe an episode that will be listened to more. Like the Lentils, when I called in on Tim Heidecker's podcast, Office Hours Live, for King Tough, people are going to go back to listen to that King Tough episode, and then they'll always hear the Lentils being talked about with King Tough. So that was like a perfect example of like when to try that, when to call in, when to strike.
It's kind of evergreen a little bit.
Exactly. Yeah. And that was like one of the most smartest things I've done to promote. I feel like it was like reaching a target audience and like, here's this other artist that they're friends and they know each other. And like, if you like King Tough, you'll love the Lentils. Like it's a no-brainer.
Some of these ideas are kind of, they require you to have like to put your pride in the back seat and to like to text a bunch of people who are not expecting to receive music. You know what I mean? Like I think a lot of us would be scared to do some of these things that you've done. Is that your personality? You don't care? You're like taking chances like that?
I find all this so much fun. So there was a moment when someone was talking about a Lentils release and they were excited about the new album. I was like, yeah, that's me. I'm putting it out. And then realizing this is a thing that that imposter syndrome I was talking about earlier. Like I have now created something that does exist. And that it's really fun where in the past I promoted myself or a band I'm in, but now I get to kind of not have an ego about that and just it's more for the love of everything. If you ever have I've never been, I've been a musician trying to make it in the music world, and that didn't really happen for me. But I have friends who have, and I feel like their victories are my victories. Like when I see someone, when I see someone on Pitchfork or on TV or on an ad, or it's I'm happy for them, and just to kind of be a part of that ecosystem is just really fun, and to love an artist and to put I really, really love the Lentils a lot. So to share my joy of that music with other people is kind of what drove me to man, if Tim Heidecker really if this guy I love, Tim Heidecker, really would listen to the Lentils, maybe he would get into it and he could start spreading the gospel of the Lentils.
Yeah.
Trying to get everything out there in the world that you
That's a really beautiful way of looking at it, and it's kind of really boils down the concept of the record label and the new record label that we promote. But I think that is a really beautiful way of looking at it, because I don't love to promote my own stuff. And when you promote your own stuff on Reddit or on a message board, you usually get kicked off, right? Because you're spam, self-promoting.
Yeah.
But when you're promoting someone else, there's way more tolerance for that on those boards, because it's coming from a real place of fandom. I mean, I've had some stuff on Indie Heads been taken down because it's my label. It's an artist on my label, but I think you're right. I feel way less shame because I'm actually a fan.
Totally. Can I give you one more quick story? I'll try to be quick.
Yeah.
The artist Bobby was the asterisks between each letter. I saw them play here locally in Western Mass, where I live, Western Massachusetts. And I immediately was like, oh my God, I love this. This is amazing. Yeah. And reached out to them immediately. We put this album out. And this is working with an artist who has they didn't even know who Discogs were,
Right.
And I'm being the old man music nerd who's telling them all about it. And it's been so much fun now to work with, working with the Lentils. They do have a fan base, but now I'm working with a newer artist with more obscure. And then all of a sudden I put their cassette for sale on my Flower Sounds Bandcamp. And then all of a sudden they're having sales in Washington and Tennessee. And
that's awesome.
And it's it struck me. And that's why I contacted you again. I was like, I think I'm hitting a point where I'm now having a fan base of people coming to Flower Sounds to see what we're putting out and to see what artists are coming here. And that's what's really exciting now, is to work with an artist I love and to see them get new fans out of the ether or out of wherever. Yeah. It's really exciting. It's
That's
really fun.
The best feeling. So you've hit 5 years?
It will be this May. And I don't know. Well, I'll have to ask you when this podcast comes up. But here's another funny thing I did. I saved a copy of each, and I think I have 3 of all 10 of the first 10 releases. Wow! So I think I'll put out a box set to coincide with the release of this episode.
Oh, cool!
Yeah. It's another silly thing. I was like, what if I hold on to a few? And that was a funny.
Smart.
So again, I only put out 100 copies of each album. So initially, the idea of the Discogs mentality of creating scarcity, exactly.
Yeah.
And so being able to, that was a nice thing to help finance the labels. you put your cassette out for $5, and then as you sell out, okay, well, the rest of the copies are $10. Well, I only got 2 copies left, $15, and like they sell.
Yeah,
and then there it is. And then there it is on Discogs, and I have a $15 cassette, and that's kind of cool because most cassettes are like $1.
Yeah, well, that's great. And hanging on to stuff is smart, because like when I find a test pressing kicking around, I know that I can sell that on Bandcamp Friday for $40, $50. Like, it's one of 5, and when it's gone, it's gone.
Totally. There are collectors out there like me, super nerds who love that stuff.
Yeah, me too. So what does the next 5 years look like? Are you looking that far? Or are you just really kind of focused on this year?
Definitely. I'm having my 14th release coming out in April of 2023 with this artist, Ari Fulman Cohen. He's a jazz musician from New York City. He does like loop bass stuff. It's beautiful.
Oh, cool.
Really excited about that. But I think I want to, the end result is to one day press vinyl. Yeah. The nice thing to people starting out, of course, cassettes there's such a quick turnaround. You can pretty much get them like in a month from ordering them. Right. Whereas vinyl is like 9 months to a year or 6. Yeah. It takes so much longer. Yeah. So I guess I'll share one of my kooky ideas. I would look. So, for example, the Lentils, the band that I keep talking about, if I ever get to a point where I have enough money in the bank and I can press a vinyl, now that the Lentils have been like, almost a decade of releases, how cool would it be to put out a record of, a compilation of the greatest hits?
A greatest hits, yeah.
And that would be really, because then having a year turnaround, I'm not at a level of Warp where, you can do all your advertising, going up to the release. Like, there's no way can I do anything like that. So if I was to wait that long, how about have a release of something like that that's special, where it's like a compilation of work? And there's a lot of artists that I can think of that I admire who don't have that like greatest hits. I think
that's a great idea. Yeah. And I've thought about doing that too, because when you look at an artist that has like a fairly decent sized discography, you're like, where do I start when it comes to printing this on vinyl? Because if they don't have any vinyl, so like a compilation, because then like you're getting the best songs.
Absolutely.
And especially that's would be killer for jazz. But yeah, I think it's a really cool thing.
Yeah, especially and that way I don't have to worry about the turnaround of waiting 9 months for, because it'll be more of a timeless
project.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
So I just one weird idea. Awesome. Yeah.
I love it.
Thank you.
I love all these ideas. Thank you for sharing them with us, and thank you for like being open and transparent with like the results too, because absolutely. I think that's the biggest thing. I mean, I almost feel like we need to have like some sort of forum for crazy ideas and how they went.
Yeah, I have some more. Maybe I'll check in with you in a few years.
Yeah, post them in the Facebook group.
Absolutely. And thank you so much. I gotta say, just a big shout out to your podcast. It's been so much fun. To listen to the episodes and just hearing the conversations. And you as an interview, Scott, I love the questions you ask. I think you do a really great job.
Oh, thank you.
I just want to say one more quick story.
Sure.
We keep bringing up Warp Records. When the moment that I fell in love with vinyl was the early 2000s, like around the year 2002. And I was a huge CD collector, and I was like, I think I want to get into records. And I ordered my first records from Warp Records, and they sent me a free 12-inch of Square Pusher. And like forever, I've been obsessed with them. And I thought that was the coolest thing, that they just gave me a free record. And if you can swing it, I think it's always nice for your fans to send them free stuff, whether it be stickers or
you don't know how the long-term impact that's going to have. I
think that's so much fun. I think it's just like if you can swing it as a small label. Yeah. And funny enough, like the funny thing is sometimes it is necessary. Like I weirdly do a lot of international sales, and sometimes the cassette's just too small of an envelope. So sometimes it's necessary to throw in the free cassette.
Just for padding.
Just for padding, and to send the envelope so you can put the address on there. But if you can, it's, this is
it's
fun.
So true.
Give your fans free stuff, as much free stuff as possible, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. And actually I invested in some really high quality stickers that cost me way more than I thought it was going to cost, but it ended up it was a big roll. And I just got rid of them. They were maybe 5 years old, and I just got rid of them. And I gave everybody one or two, and sometimes would slap it on the box. It was a good investment.
I think so too. Those end up on cars and people's gear cases and guitars and drum sets. Yeah. I think that's a great idea. I think stickers are awesome.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for doing this. It's been great to chat with you.
Thank you, Scott. Thanks for making this podcast. I love it. I'm a big fan.
Oh, thank you.